Hello, Sissy. Good morning.
Hey, Sissy, back for another chat.
I know, except this time they get a special view, our listeners or viewers, because this is not a chat we've had yet on the phone.
Oh, that is true. I know we've just been saying, okay, we need to talk about this. And so here we are.
Yeah, you want to tell them what we're talking about today?
All right, we're talking about habits and habit formation and the identity piece around habits because we've both been reading this book, Atomic Habits by James Clear. I picked it for my book club for my community, and I think Sissy just wanted to read it. So either way,
Support.
yeah, and some support. So it's been really good. There's great information. I mean, my gosh, it came out in 2018. It's already a timeless classic, I feel like, for any sort of self-help improvement. Really just helping you come to terms with getting your act together and really being intentional with how you live. And it all comes down to habits. And those habits are really closely correlated with our identity. So that's kind of like the first key takeaway that jumped out of the pages as I started reading. And of course, he continues to build on that as he explores other things in the book. But it all comes down to your habits are what give you freedom, and your habits are what basically create the person that you're going to become. So essentially, adopting the habits of the person you want to be is exactly how you become that person.
Yeah, and I can see how this book would be useful for anyone who's looking to change any sort of habits in their life, but reading it as a new business owner, I felt like it had a whole different like level of insight. And I
Mhm.
think that identity piece is really huge to counteracting imposter syndrome when you're showing up in a new space as like a new business owner. So I noticed a shift in my dedication to my writing once I got comfortable calling myself a writer. And
Mm.
there were shifts in how I prioritized my writing time or anything that enhanced or facilitated my writing, like being a part of a writer's group or reading and that sort of thing. So that identity piece is really big. And this book, I think, just hits different when you're starting a really big new endeavor,
Mhm.
and that's a huge time where you're establishing the habits, like with your business, like how are you fitting that time into your schedule? What aspects of your business are you prioritizing? How are you showing up? How are you networking? How are you promoting? How are you finding time to do all the behind the scenes building and growth? And so I found this book to be so timely for us because of that. And I know that you selected it for your book club because of just the personal development side of it. You've got people coming into your community that are looking to potentially start new habits or enhance their habits around the way that they eat.
Mhm.
And we also, within my writer community, are hoping to facilitate people creating the habit or supporting the habit of showing up regularly to do their writing or editing, whatever, working towards whatever writing project they currently have.
Mhm.
And so there were so many nuggets of wisdom within this book that not only help us as business owners and how we show up for our business, but also how to support those who are coming into our communities in forming those habits that are going to help them get the most out of our communities.
Right. Right. And briefly before the call, we kind of touched on a myriad of different, aspects in this book that we've taken away. So we'll kind of run through some of those. Um, what was first on your list? Where do you want to start?
Well, I thought I would just briefly talk about some of the habits that I'm looking either started to establish at the beginning of the year, and
Mhm.
then through reading this book, some things that I'm looking to find room and time for and turn into habits.
Mm.
So initially, I set some intentions for myself this year. I wanted to meditate daily.
Mhm.
I wanted to do more reading in order to gain insight into how particular authors write their books to help my own writing process. I wanted to work towards the editing process of my own book. And then there were some aspects of my physical health. I've got a couple of different like punch cards and memberships at various like yoga studios, dance studios, hot springs that I was underutilizing. And so those were my four sort of focuses at the beginning of the year.
Mhm.
And some of them I attach some more, measurable things to. Other portions of it, it was just like, at some point, I just need to get this done.
Mhm.
I've been able to track the daily meditation. I have like a El Cheapo calendar from Walmart that hangs on my fridge that I just mark each day that I meditate. And that's
Mhm.
also where I mark how often I'm using my yoga punch card or any of those things.
Mhm.
And then I've sort of built in the structure with the business and the
Mhm.
book club piece to push myself to do the reading I need to do. And then
Mhm.
also because I have to show up for our time to write meetings, I'm already have that time carved out to work towards editing my book and finishing up my memoir.
Right.
So those are the things that I had started from the beginning of the year. But as I was reading through Atomic Habits, there were some other things that I felt inspired to incorporate, and things that I knew I needed to do for the business, but I was having trouble like really building an intentional time to
Mhm.
do. So these are things like within the last 3 or 4 days that I've
Mhm.
started like tracking how I'm using my time and trying to see where I can be consistent and where I apply these. So
Mhm.
I'm by no means like in a habit with these. These are just things I'm looking to figure out where they belong.
Mhm.
One of those is posting to social media. I had
Mhm.
seen from my previous weeks of posting that mornings gave me the best engagement. So that has typically been one of my morning routines. Like as soon as I'm done with my slower morning habits with coffee and everything, once I sit down at the computer, the social media posting is what I do first.
Mhm.
But I also want to find time to screen for podcast guest spots,
Mhm.
for submitting portions of my memoir, like individual stories, to magazines for publication,
Mhm.
and then all the other like behind the scenes, just business to do's, but also like the course creation and the creative projects that are going to enhance the different opportunities we have and resources we have within the community
Mhm.
that we need to keep pushing towards and continuing to grow, for our community and for that engagement.
Right. Yeah, you touched on two really key things. And the first one is tracking. I love that you've got that calendar. So you've got that visual cue. You walk by the fridge and you can see, did I meditate? Have I used a punch card recently? So you're keeping yourself accountable and you're also giving yourself that visual reminder. And that's one thing that James Clear talks about in the book is tracking those habits and finding a way to make sure that you're checking in on yourself and staying consistent with your habits. And so that's really good. I like that you have that. I don't have anything like that. I'm just kind of like keeping things going in my head, but I've done something slightly different where I've done a habit scorecard, which is another component he talks about. So he talks about taking kind of an itinerary or maybe even just a section of the day where perhaps you could use a little more structure and where you're like, oh, I know I need to do this, but where would it fit in? So I did one for myself and I kind of looked at what part of my day do I want to try and incorporate some new things? And some of the new things I'm trying to incorporate is like you meditating. I think we both have been dragging our feet so long on the meditating. We know it's like that personal growth piece we need, big eye roll, but like, okay, we're just doing it finally. And then another one is, making that time daily for the business as opposed to just waiting for inspiration to strike. Um, and so obviously for me with my two kids and my situation, those things are going to either happen in the morning or most likely in the afternoon when the kids are napping. So I have made it when I did my habit scorecard, I did it for after I put the kids down for nap. And so I just looked at what do I actually do when I put the kids down for nap? And I realized I make lunch and then I go to the kitchen and clean up. And then I might start some laundry or fold some clothes. And then maybe if I'm feeling inspired, I'll go sit down in the office and do something, but not necessarily. and so it really just added up to a lot of putzing around. And then, of course, kids wake up, I make them a snack, I just do a few more chores, maybe I'd listen to a podcast. And so I looked at that habit scorecard and realized I'm really not optimizing my child free time because I'm instead using it to do things like feed myself, which I can do while the kids are awake, and doing house chores. I do that stuff all the time when the kids are underfoot. So that kind of stuff, while it's not a bad habit to have, I rated it as a neutral habit. It's not something that's helping propel me forward. So in doing that habit scorecard and assessing my habits, I realized, okay, these are the things that I'm doing. And while some of them are good, some of them are neutral, and one of them was bad. One of them was, I think after lunch, I'll sit there and scroll on Instagram on my phone. And gosh, you know what a time suck that is. You just like, there go 35 minutes of totally wasted time. So that was my one bad habit where I'm like, oh yeah, that one I need to cut that out. But otherwise, it really helped me see that I need to structure this time, this nap time period of the day a bit better. So what I've been doing since is putting the kids down for, well, before I put the kids down for nap, I make sure that I go ahead and eat and have my meal while the kids are still awake. And that way I'm not overly hungry and desperate to get them down and then go eat. So that way I can have a nice, balanced, calm meal. And then I go and put them down for nap. And then I immediately come into the office, sit on the floor with my back against the little wooden chest. And then I set a timer for 10 minutes and meditate. After 10 minutes of meditating, I do 10 push-ups. And then I sit in my chair here in the office, and I set another timer for 30 minutes. And all I'm asking myself is to give myself 30 minutes to show up and start. Now, there's another little trick that James Clear talks about in this book, and it's basically in building a habit. He calls it the 2-minute rule. He says, convince yourself, okay, well, I'm going to go for a walk for just 2 minutes, or I'm going to go to the gym for just 2 minutes. And you just tell yourself, or, I'm going to journal for 2 minutes, and you give yourself that window of time and just try it. And if you want to totally quit after 2 minutes, fine, that's fine. You've already gone through the motions to make that habit, to kind of facilitate that habit and to start it, because that's the biggest thing, right? Is starting your habits. And
Mhm.
so, okay, well, 2 minutes is a little unrealistic in getting work done, but I can sit down for 30 minutes and get stuff done. Now, pretty much every single time I've set that timer for 30 minutes, I end up sitting here and working for an hour or 2.5 hours until the kids wake up. So that works beautifully for me. I'm actively engaged. I'm doing what I feel like I need to do. And I do think I could use some more structure in that time. But again, for me, it is about where I am right now with my habits. It's about starting that and implementing that. And so I do that by following my habit stack. And that's another thing he talks about is habit stacking. My kids down for nap, meditating, 10 push-ups, set the timer for 30 minutes to work. So that all occurs in the same order every time, so that, just the cues are already built into my day. And that's kind of where I have been in my habits as far as, trying to build good business habits. And then, of course, I have things where I'm trying to take it a bit farther. I sat down and tried to make a bigger list of things. It was maybe a bit, I was feeling really excited that day, and maybe it was overkill in what I'm trying to achieve on a daily basis.
Is that the
But
list you sent me? And I was like, where is the rest and relaxation?
yeah. Yeah, you're like, okay, great goal, sissy, great list. But I see no self-care in here. And all I sent back was like 3 crying face emojis, just like haha. Because on that one particular day, I was just feeling on fire. And I'm like, oh, I don't need self-care and rest. And then guess what? Yesterday, totally did not get jack done because I was so burnt out. And yeah, so it's really important in your habits and your routines to make them reasonable, to make them realistic, and to build in time for self-care. And you've done a good job of that. You still have those structured into your day, which I'm a little envious of. And there's some parts of me that kind of feels like, well, it's kind of hustle and grind because I've got kids and they're constantly out of school, and it's a challenge. But other ways, I'm like, yeah, I know Sissy's right, and I need to find time for self-care.
Yeah, you brought up so many good points. So I'm going to circle back to some of them. I think if I'm correct, I think what you're doing with your like business time, like that 30 minutes that expands to up to 2 hours, I think
Mhm.
that's called time blocking, where it's
Okay.
like you set aside like a particular window of time. You don't necessarily ascribe what specific tasks you're going to do, but you just know you have that established time set aside to do broad topic business, right? And
Mhm.
that's a tactic I see all the time in, encouraging entrepreneurs how to like set aside that time for them to show up for their business. So I think that's great. You've really identified some big time sucks with like the scrolling or even just doing things at the time of day that it's not like optimized or ideal. Like you identified that, oh, I'm kind of wasting this kid free time doing something that I could do with them. Whereas there's plenty of things on my list that I really are done or most productive when I don't have the kids, right there with me.
Mhm.
And I wanted to highlight something. I should have mentioned this earlier. So I started out just like you sort of well, now you have an established time that you meditate. But when we first started, we were sort of like, whenever we had time, we would do our like 10 minutes of meditation.
Mhm.
And I found that there were some days that I would almost forget, like there was one time I was doing it like right before bed
Mhm.
or, later into the afternoon. And I was like, I don't think I'm really like, I'm having to spend so much energy remembering to do this habit so I don't slip up that I needed to find like a particular point in the day for it. So I built in a cue. So now as I'm brewing my coffee in the morning, it doesn't matter what time I wake up, whether that's 4:30 because that's what time I've been waking up lately, or whether it's 7, when I brew my coffee in the morning, as it's brewing, that's when I sit down and I do my 10 minutes, which is great
Mhm.
because by the time I'm done with my 10 minutes, my coffee's ready.
Right.
Before I was using that time to already start like my morning like scrolling or YouTube videos or podcasts, which is how I ease into my day. And I do allow myself that time, especially since it's usually very early in the morning, to
Mhm.
ease into my day. But I wanted to prioritize the meditating first, and that's worked really well. So well that when I was staying at a house where I was pet sitting, where I didn't have that reminder of brewing my coffee, I was like, "Oh, I forgot to meditate," because
Right.
it became such an automatic thing to come after the brewing of the coffee.
Mhm.
What I've been doing the last couple of days related to the whole time suck piece in trying to identify places where I can make more diligent room in my schedule,
Mhm.
I've been doing like the time tracking.
Mhm.
So just noting what kind of my go-to is for my routine with each day. And for me, my days fluctuate, a good bit depending on what I have going on, what kind of meetings I have, whether I'm recording podcasts or I'm doing like a podcast host training and things. So it does vary a little bit, but I wanted to observe like what kind of consistent stuff I'm doing at certain times of the day. And that's been helpful in identifying that like my evenings, particularly like post dinner time,
Mhm.
are really lost to like Netflix and that sort of endeavor.
Mhm.
And so I've tried to be more aware and disciplined within the last week of enjoying a show while I'm eating dinner because I'm going to eat, right? And that's a time where my hands are occupied. So that's when I'll watch a show. But after I'm done eating, after I put the dishes away, after that episode is over, then I turn it off in order to
Mhm.
make time for reading. Not
I like
only does this help the reading come into my schedule, but then there's all these other hacks because that's better for your sleep to not have like the blue screen and everything. It helps calm your nervous system at night.
Mhm.
So that's been one of the things that I've identified as one of those time sucks, and we're trying to minimize it, put it in a more confined box. Not saying I can't do it, but
Mhm.
just giving it some limitations and then finding room to fit in those healthier habits that I'm trying to make some more
Mhm.
time for.
I like that. Yeah, one thing I did sort of similar, and I started this more so the end of this past year, was I decided that by the end of the year, I was done with getting into bed and watching Netflix on, tablet, like just a mindless show, usually something I've seen before, 30-minute comedy shows. But I decided I'm done with that. And instead, I can either read or journal before falling asleep. And so it's kind of like, a little productive downtime, but it's so much, it's like you're saying, there's so many good built-in benefits. We don't need screens right blasting our retinas, right before bed. That doesn't help us. So it's definitely better, but it does take away, it's more intentional time, and it's not just that time suck where, usually I'd find myself, okay, I'll watch another episode. Well, I'm not quite tired. I'll watch another episode. I'm staying up way later than I need to. Whereas if I'm reading pages in a book, like you start to feel your eyes get heavy, or you get done journaling, you're like, all right, close this, put it over, and you're ready to go to sleep. So that's been another small little area where I tried to take back a bit more control. And I don't know that that is changing my business or anything, other than the fact that the journaling is probably helpful. And the books that I like to read are like, personal growth related.
What I love about that, which I haven't done, but I think that that would be really cool, is that you've given yourself a choice. Because,
Mm,
sometimes you block your schedule and you're like, I'm supposed to do posting
mm,
to social media at this time, but maybe you're not feeling it, right?
mm,
Or like if you had only said, well, this is my reading time. What
mm,
if you're in between books? What if you just are not in the mood to read because, and then you're just like, oh, I should read, but I don't want to read. Whereas
mm,
you've given yourself two really great choices that move you forward, but you can like weave between them depending on, what you need for the day, where your inspiration is. And I think that's
mm.
really cool.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that is really cool. I like that I built in that choice.
James Clear didn't say nothing about that. I like the choices. I like the
I like
two
the
good
choices.
choices.
I like the choices too. I mean, and yeah, it has worked. I haven't reached for the iPad at night, which is great. So, it's been holding me accountable.
Well, and I think because you have choices, like I could see myself, if I only had the one choice, if I was like, this is the reading time, I could
Mhm,
see myself negotiating of like, well, maybe tonight I could watch a show. But because you have two choices, it's like if you really don't want to read, you
mhm.
journal.
Yeah. Yeah. If
And
I
I think
really don't
that's
want to journal and sit with my feelings, I can read,
you can read, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
whichever one.
I think that's awesome. Let me pull up a couple more of our notes. How do you, so if you're not tracking, so see, how are you holding yourself accountable to these habits or to these goals?
Mm, that's a good question. Um, Sheer raw willpower, which is going to run out. So, like, I need to work on the system, right? That's what James Clear talks about. He's like, your habits are only as strong as the system in which they operate. So, I am trying to work on that. Okay. I will say, though, I think that this podcast helps tremendously because
For
if
sure.
I don't do what I'm supposed to do for my business, we don't have content to talk about. So I pretty much have to go and do my stuff because otherwise Sissy is going to threaten to go on this podcast without me and leave me in the dust.
I did, guys. I had a whole episode planned for today because Sissy was burned out with having the kids at home. And she's like, I don't know that I can do it tomorrow. And I was like, that's fine. I'll just go in and do my own episode.
I know. I was like, she's going to do it without me. What's this though? Yeah. So, it does hold me accountable to have this. And, I've got because I do currently have active members, granted, none of them are paying. They're all the members who have gifted free membership to. Because I have them, I do feel like I owe them, like they are depending on me to be the community host and to facilitate. So that's a big one because I just actually genuinely like these people. And I have those meetings, 3 times a week. So there's a lot of accountability built into that, just in that I need to have stuff going. And then another piece I would say for accountability, I mean, it's really helping that 30-minute window, like we've talked about after meditating and push-ups. It's like, okay, I have this 30 minutes that, something is going to get done. Um, and that helps. But yeah, I do feel like I need something more. And so that's why the other night I sent you a screenshot or, I took a picture and share it with you. I kind of mapped out what I want my system to look like. And I went through like Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and I just kind of wrote down what do I want to try and focus on so that if I wake up in the morning like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do today for my business. Well, if I go and look at Wednesday, it says, okay, 2 p.m. meeting, got that. Add reels to YouTube shorts. Okay, like that's the day of the week that I'll do that, and then set up live event for the following week. Okay, easy things to do, but like very approachable and specific. Whereas if I look on, say, Thursdays, it's going to be an Instagram reel promoting my community or posting a playback from, the recorded meeting the previous day. YouTube video edit and upload, things like that. So it's just, I'm hoping that in those times where I'm like, oh, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do, that having this list will then help me be accountable. I'll come in and see like, okay, this is what I work on Tuesdays or whatever.
Like you, most of my accountability is tied to the ways that I have to show up for the 2 podcasts and the meetings that I have within the community. That same push you feel of like, you know, and I do too, of like, we have to progress with our businesses, so we have something to talk about here. The same is true in my community or within that podcast, the Inspired Writer Collective podcast, because I have to have something to talk about in those podcasts. I have to have something to post leading into or following a time to write session where I'm saying, this is what I worked on today. There is built-in accountability in that. And that's been super helpful for me because I was not showing up consistently to work on my book ahead of that. I wasn't even consistently reading other people's work ahead of that. I was showing up for my writers group. I wasn't always sharing what I was working on because frankly, I wasn't like actually working on anything. I wasn't actively editing anything. And by creating the business and having it leaning into those things that I want to add to enhance my own writer experience, knowing that that's going to be beneficial to other writers who are in a similar place in their process, I've sort of hacked it to where that's
Right.
my own accountability and that's my own, you know, feet to the fire of getting this stuff done. The parts, and of course I highlighted these earlier, the parts that I feel like are still lacking are the ones that are solely about me and that no one's going to hold me accountable for, like submitting my writing to magazines. The course building, yes, that'll come around because Stephanie and I have a weekly meeting and we set, you know, our business goals for the week. We have very clear objectives, kind of like you were describing. You know, we highlight what things we're going to promote in social media that week and what behind the scenes things need to be taken care of and when our podcast recording is going to be scheduled for that week, that sort of like particulars. But then there's all the stuff that's for my own business development related specifically to the future marketing of my book, to potentially offering coaching to other writers that no one's really going to push me to do. And they're bigger goals. They take a longer amount of time. I sent you this episode from Jocko. I don't know if you had a chance to watch it on a YouTube video, but he talks about strategic goals and tactical goals. And the strategic goals are like related to like getting fit or writing a book, those big long-term things where going to the gym or trying to do some kind of sprint towards your goal is really not conducive because you really just need to be chipping away at it a little bit at a time. And his recommendation, instead of doing the like low-hanging fruit tactical goals, post this specific reel to social media or schedule this event, is to make sure you're carving out time for your strategic goals first thing in the morning, because those are the easiest ones to let slip because you don't have a due date coming up, right? Like they're so long term that you don't have like that deadline, that rush to get it done, but you need to be doing them all along to get wherever it is that you're trying to go, right? If I don't practice and work towards submitting my writing to magazines, even if it's not that great now, how am I ever going to get the feedback to then improve it, to then submit it, to then get it published so I have a byline and things I can say, I'm published here, here, and here before I launch my book? I mean, that all needs to be happening now. But because I don't have due dates, unless you build in your own due dates, because it's a longer term, bigger picture goal, like building your email list or building out a big course that you're going to offer, either externally or in conjunction with your community,
Mhm.
the recommendation is that you put those things first in your day because it's so easy to let them slip in lieu of the urgent tasks.
Yes.
It's like, have you seen that grid, the urgent versus important grid of how you relate your tasks? I've
Mhm.
seen it mostly in like, the office, right? Where you're trying to decide, what's urgent, what's important, what's urgent and important, and how you
Mhm.
prioritize your tasking. And basically,
Mhm.
the strategic goals are those things that are important, but they're
Right.
not urgent. And so it's really easy to let those like slip through the cracks until you essentially miss your window.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes so much sense. I listened to a podcast with James Clear. He was the guest on the podcast. I think it was Peak Performance or something like that. But he basically said that the biggest hindrances towards the number one thing on your list are the numbers 2 and 3 things on your list.
Oh,
Which I was just like, what? Okay. Because we've all been,
bam, that
I know,
hits.
dropping the knowledge via the podcast, but it made so much sense because yeah, we have this big term goal and exactly like you're saying, it's strategic. It's the long term. It's like the big
Hard.
thing, but you get
Mhm.
so caught up with it, like, and it's because numbers 2 and 3 feel easier. They feel more approachable. So then I think that's where it can become very handy to then try and break that bigger strategic goal down into smaller goals. And he talks about, I forget what he refers to it as. I doubt I'll be able to flip to it super quick. But James Clear talks about that and about how you want to try to build the habit by, oh gosh, habit shaping. I did turn to it. That's what it's called. And so he says, talk about building that habit in different phases. And so,
Right.
he goes through a couple examples like becoming an early riser. He says, okay, phase 1 is be home by 10 p.m. every night. Well, okay, that's good. If you're staying out till late in the morning, yeah, it would behoove you to get home. Then phase 2, have all devices turned off by 10 p.m. every night. Phase 3, be in bed by 10 p.m. every night, maybe reading a book or something. Phase 4, have the lights off by 10 p.m. every night. And phase 5 is start waking up at 6 a.m. every day. He didn't just say, like, oh, set your alarm clock for 6 a.m.
Right.
So it's taking that bigger goal and breaking it down. And obviously, that's like, we're talking about way bigger fish to fry than waking up at 6 a.m. But still, it's that idea
Right.
of habit shaping by slowly doing the things that help cultivate that over time. Like you have this time to write where you're sitting there and for 40 minutes, twice a week, sometimes more, you are sitting there working on the editing of your book. That is going to get you to your strategic goal.
Right. And the strategic goal is a successful book launch, right? So that's in order to do that, I've broken it down into it would be helpful to have a community to
Mhm,
launch to, whether that's just on social media or within the community.
mhm,
It would be helpful for my name to be out there in some capacity, whether that's guest podcasting spots, whether that's bylines, because I've had individual stories published so people have an idea of what my tone is as a writer,
mhm,
and so it's like these are the smaller habits that I
mhm,
need to do in order to launch a book and get, eyes on it early on or, at lunchtime or soon thereafter. And
mhm.
so even though the book is nowhere near ready, like these are the early stages. I'm not setting the alarm for 6 a.m. yet. I don't have a publication date yet. I'm not doing pre-sales yet. This is the time to build the avenues to even launch too. Otherwise it's just shelved on some Amazon, warehouse bookshelf. I mean, not even, they don't even print them until you order them, but you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I've got to have somewhere to like share it. And so
Mhm.
these are the early building blocks, but it is so tricky. And I love that advice or wisdom from James about the competition is like the number 2, 3, 4 on the list because
Mhm.
was my dorm room ever cleaner when I had to get a paper written?
Right?
And that's another thing I've noticed is my morning time is my best time mentally. I know some people like they're better at the evening,
Mhm.
but my morning time is when I'm most on it, when I'm most mentally clear, when I'm most focused. And I do have a tendency, because I don't like clutter, I don't like dirt, I don't like grime. I want to get the laundry started. And I'm kind of forcing myself, as I've been logging, what I'm doing when. I've been noticing, like, you know what? These errands could wait. These, house chores could wait. I could even do some of these errands after I pick my kid up from school. Yeah, I'd have to bring her along, but at least then grocery shopping is not taking the place of researching podcasts and sending emails and securing guest spots and figuring out what writing contests are out there that I can submit to.
Mhm.
Because those I won't be able to do with my kid in the car.
Right. Exactly. 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 Same sort of thing I came up with when I did my habit scorecards. Like, what am I doing putzing around the house, tidying and cleaning when I could be dedicating this time more specifically towards business building?
Yeah, and maybe there's even some stuff I could do like in the evening
Mhm.
before bed
Mhm.
that allows me to still have a clean house in the morning.
Right. Right. You've already identified that time. It's like, okay, maybe there's your choice, sissy. Okay, so after you have your meal, if you don't feel like doing your reading, you can tidy up.
There you go. Love
And
tidying.
you get choices too.
Choices. Yeah, so I think that's, yeah, I think that's really insightful. I think that's really good advice.
Mhm. Yeah, and just briefly to touch on this because we haven't really otherwise, is he talks about environment is really important in shaping your habits. And so in some cases he talks about, leaving a space ready for the next use. You put the remote control back, you put the pillows back, you fold the blanket on the couch. That way the space is ready and inviting the next time you come in. And same sort of thing. I mean, you have your little desk set up in the corner. I've got my little office space, but like that environment that we set up, it does make a difference. It does serve as a cue when we come and sit down in these spaces to know, okay, this is what's next. And, I think it's also the same reason that you and I kind of get distracted by clutter is because your environment really does affect the way that you interact with it and with others and the things that you're able to do. So, yeah, I think it's helpful to have those little habits of picking up and tidying up, so that it doesn't become this big thing that can then serve as a distraction when it actually comes time to put in the work.
And similarly, this is a big plug for community. I wrote down this quote. I'm paraphrasing because I just wrote down keywords, but he says, if you want to build a better habit, then you need to find um, a culture or community where the desired behavior is the normal behavior,
Mm,
and you already have something in common with the group.
yeah.
So I remember hearing that when I was listening to the audiobook, and immediately I was like, yes, this is exactly it. This is exactly what Sissy and I are trying to do with our communities. We are bringing like-minded people together that have a common interest, that there's that commonality, right?
Mhm.
And we're all striving to have some sort of desired outcome or behavior, and we're normalizing that within this group. For
Mhm.
me, it's showing up for these time to write sessions. It's showing up consistently as a writer and building that habit of writing daily or a couple of times a week in these, 40-minute blocks that we have established. And if you come into the community and you do what the people do, you will be showing up and writing as well. It's just
Mhm.
built in to the community. Same with reading like a writer. That's why we have the book club, because that's a habit that we know is valuable to other fellow writers.
Mhm.
And so if you're a part of the community, you'll see that. You'll be engaging with that. It doesn't really require a whole lot of effort on your part because you're already showing up in that space.
Mhm.
I think it's the reason I prefer to work out in like group classes
Mhm.
versus holding myself purely accountable to go to the gym whenever and do whatever.
Mhm.
I like the structure of a group setting, and that's why I gravitate towards like the yoga classes.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, kind of in the same vein of what you're talking about, he mentions that a shared identity is the most powerful one. So, we talked about at the beginning how identity is key and we need to identify as whatever it is we're trying to do. So, your group, they're identifying as writers. My group, they're identifying as carnivores or, animal-based eaters, however they want to, break it down. But essentially, they're people who are coming together for a specific purpose, and that purpose is a vote towards their identity. Each and every action that supports that is a vote to who they want to become, and then doing that in a shared space, you have that shared sense of identity, and that is the most powerful form of helping us stick with our habits and maintain them, because each and every one of those habits, as we implement them, as we do them regularly, it's a vote for being in that group, and we all crave that sense of belonging. And again, that just goes to support why we're doing what we're doing and creating communities. It's because people want to belong, they want to connect, and they need that sense of shared identity for them to then, adhere to the habits that are going to propel them towards success. Just like we talked about at the beginning, the habits that you adopt are really the habits of the person that you want to become, and that is the way that you grow and change. So simply having that shared identity in a group is a significant factor in people's success in getting to wherever it is they want to go.
Yeah, it's one thing to adopt that as your own identity, and then it levels up when you see that other people see you as that identity,
Mhm.
right? So it's
Yep.
like I can say, I'm a writer, but then it's even more enhanced when other people see, oh, Elizabeth's a writer,
Mhm.
right? Because it's like bolstering that identity. It's not just coming from your own ascribing to that. Like now other people are seeing you as that because of the way that you're showing up and the way that you're implementing those habits of that identity.
Exactly. Yep.
Another thing I wanted to hit on, especially as new business owners, is the concept of explore and exploit. So
Mm.
in the book, James Clear gives the example of like dating, about how initially you're exploring, checking out different maybe Tinder profiles or whatever, going on individual like first dates. And then as you find things that click, things that work for you, then you shift more onto the exploit side. That's where you make more commitments to, oh, I'm going to pursue this. This is who I'm going to date, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
So when we translate this to business stuff, I'm especially finding this in regards to social media posting and trying to figure out like what even works, right?
Mhm.
So it's like I'm exploring. I'm using different platforms. I'm posting at different times. I'm trying some hashtags. I'm trying some trends. I'm trying, music that is attractive. I'm trying to just post something funny or post something promotional or post
Mhm.
something that is just giving value and seeing what clicks. And my hope, because I'm still very much in the explore phase, my hope is that as we find the things that hit, like that certain time of posting, we've seen to identify the morning time, at least for our TikTok post, is the best.
Mhm.
And so as we find something that works, then exploit. So then generally posting in the morning. That
Mhm.
doesn't mean I only post in the morning because you should never stop exploring,
Mhm.
but I generally plan my posts in the morning. And if I feel inspiration to do something extra in the afternoon, then I will.
Mhm. Yeah.
How do you see that showing up for you in your business?
Gosh, I mean, I'm in it right now. So, in previous episodes, I've talked about how, oh gosh, I really need to make my YouTube videos. I really need to do this. I need to promote. I need to, make posts. And so that's the place where I feel the least equipped. Um, but I'm kind of throwing a bunch of things at the wall. I'm doing things like posting on Instagram, posting value content. And then I'm also doing things to try and share a little bit more of me. That part's really hard. I do struggle with that. And then that's why I had to write it down in here in my habit system, or at least my intentions is post an Instagram promoting the community, because like for some reason I'm still just like a mental block on promoting the community. And again, it's probably this like identity piece. It's like I've been trying on this identity piece of I'm a health coach and I'm a community builder. but I haven't fully leaned into that. And so I know that's part of it. And so hopefully in creating those Instagram reels, promoting my community, I'm able to lean into and identify with that, that moniker myself. Um, but I also just went through and like batch filmed a bunch of YouTube videos, and I'm gonna, work on those and edit those, upload those, link them actually back to my, course. I have an e-course that I've created for new carnivores. So, it's kind of still like dabbling. A lot of the videos I just created are information based. Whereas I really think that the good videos are going to come from me actually sharing more of my story and my experience. So again, I'm still kind of like trying, but not really trying everything, but I know what's next. And to my credit, I've really had a slow month and a half, 2 months, just with the kids being sick and then out of school. It's been absolutely outrageous. They were out of school for over, 11 days this last stretch, just for cold weather and some snow. It was wild, but we're at the point where they're finally back in school. So I am able to really lean into this habit building. Again, there's been a shift in my environment and routine. So it gives me the perfect opportunity to lean into creating those habits intentionally. But yeah, I'm the same as you. I think the social media part is the most difficult part for me, and I'm not quite sure exactly how that's going to pan out. But I know that that's just part of the process. I've built the platform, I show up regularly there. I feel very confident engaging in that space. But where I am still struggling is in like the marketing and the sales and like getting that out there, because I don't know. I mean, in some ways it feels grimy, but it's not. But that's like a self-limiting belief I have to work on overcoming.
My frustration recently, and I expressed this to you the other day, is like for a little while, I was not super consistent with the social media. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm consistent now. This is all kind of like newer push. But I really was super proud of some of the reels and posts that I made for this week that I posted on Instagram. And literally, you liked it, and that was it. It felt like it didn't get anywhere beyond my like immediate followers,
Mhm.
despite using hashtags, despite having catchy, engaging stuff, and it's like I don't understand like why the algorithm is like I'm not able to access it. It feels like there's a wall.
Mhm.
And that gets really frustrating.
Mhm.
As far as like the sharing the story, I know that for Stephanie and I, the next piece is figuring out the technology, because I know we already have access to a lot of this, of
Mhm.
turning our podcast into clips that we
Right.
can then post to social media. It's the whole
Right.
reason why we go through the effort of doing
Mhm.
a video podcast
Mhm.
versus just strictly audio. Audio would
Mhm.
be easier,
Mhm.
but we do the video because then we know we can use those clips to post on video facing social media like Instagram and TikTok.
Mhm.
And it's just a matter of us. That's one of our objectives for this week, is to play around with like YouTube shorts.
Mhm.
Uh, we had gotten some recommendations that was, okay, post your full length podcast,
Mhm.
make 3 8 to 15 minute segments that are
Mhm.
like more like a particular portion of the conversation. Like maybe if I was going to do it for this episode, I would cover the part about us talking about the tracking of our
Mhm.
habits, or, eliminating the time sucks, right? And title the video in an engaging way like that. And
Mhm.
then you want, I think they said like 5 1 minute
Mm.
shorts. And from that single, 45 minutes of podcast recording, you now have so many different ways that
Mhm.
people are seeing what kind of value you're putting out there. Because right now, the bulk of our value that Stephanie and I are putting out, the bulk of our personal stories that we're putting out are within the podcast.
Right. Right.
And it's already recorded, so it's there. So I don't feel the need to then, hold up my phone and record something for a short video. It's just that roadblock and understanding the technology
Mhm.
to then clip those videos and post them. There is
Mhm.
some like built-in stuff. I know we have access through our like editing software that we use for the podcast, Descript. I know there's features in there.
Mhm.
YouTube may even have features itself built in to take an uploaded YouTube video and then clip it into shorts. It's
Mhm.
just a matter of us taking out that time on the backside to
Mhm.
figure out how to do that. Because you're
Mhm.
right, like putting those stories out there, those personal stories, and also presenting value,
Mhm.
those are going to be the biggest engagements. I mean,
Yeah.
trends are great, they put eyes on you, but you're just doing more of the trend. It's rare that you can really promote yourself or your business through the trend.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think you're spot on. I think that the way that y'all are setting it up with the podcast and then clipping that down into shorts will be really helpful. Um, yeah, we're just at that phase, where we're kind of we're exploring everything until we find what to exploit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I wanted to talk about, because it hit me so strongly and I felt just very validated. It was either the last chapter or next to last chapter of Atomic Habits,
Mhm.
where James Clear was giving the example of the Dilbert cartoonist and
Mhm.
saying, all you have to do is be within the top like 25% of people in the world with a particular skill,
Mhm.
and then combine this, subset of these skills that you have where you're decently good at,
Mhm.
and that's where you can find success. So he gave this example of the cartoonist, and he was like, well, he was a decent artist,
Mhm.
not great enough to just make a living being an artist, having a studio, doing commissioned work, whatever. He also could tell jokes, and he was relatively funny. Now, he was never going to make it big as a stand-up comedian. He wasn't that good, but he could tell jokes and make up jokes better than the average person, right? And then he had this business background, so he was able to combine the drawing with the comedic element, and then he had this special sort of niche topic that was not already covered within the cartoon comic strip world.
Mhm.
And because when he combined those elements, that's what created an avenue for success for him.
Mhm.
So as I was listening to this, I was hiking and I was like, oh, well, I mean, I'm not a super great writer. Like I'm newer to this. I'm learning, I'm growing. That's just a part of the writing process.
Mhm.
But I'm decently good at it.
Mhm.
And I know from, feedback and observations that I'm really good at encouraging other people who feel stuck and at helping them come up with like creative ideas. I love like, digging into someone's project with them and helping them come up with things whenever they, just aren't sure what to do next.
Mhm.
And so yeah, I'm within the top 25% of people in doing
Yeah,
that.
easily.
And I gotta be in like the top 10% of people willing to be vulnerable, because I know hardly anyone is comfortable being vulnerable, but I have this like eerie level of comfort with just putting my stuff out there.
Right. Yeah.
Um, and so it's like, while there may not have been a like obvious go-to position for someone who is a writer and an encourager and willing to be vulnerable,
Mhm.
I've magically created this space where I have a writing community, and I
Mhm.
personally am leaning more towards developing coaching for other fellow memoir writers who want to share their stories that requires them to be vulnerable,
Mhm.
and helping them craft that in a way that feels respectful to their story, their boundaries around their story, but also allows these diverse experiences and messages to get out, because I think that cultivating more empathy in this world is one of the few things that can save it. And we just need more stories out there. No one ever gets tired of reading stories when that's, their experience. Like, I love adventure hiking stories. I don't care if you're hiking the same trail as this
Mhm.
other memoirist. I'm gonna read your story too. Or when
Mhm.
I was trying to get pregnant, I was watching everybody's 2-week wait YouTube videos. It did not
Right.
matter who you were. If I had not watched your video yet to see what symptoms and indicators early on that you were pregnant, like I was there for it,
I
right?
did that too. That's so funny.
Yeah, so you don't have to feel like, your thing isn't unique. Like when it comes to like your actual experience, it is unique, and we do want to hear it, even if we've heard similar experiences, because when you are searching for those answers, you want all the examples you can get. So I just felt so validated at the ending of the book, because I felt like I've created this space for myself when I couldn't find it out there already existing in the world.
Mhm.
I've created a space where I get to show up with this special skill set, and the combination is what makes it so killer.
I think you're spot on. You're absolutely spot on. Yeah. You found your Dilbert cartoon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, everyone, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please like the video. If you haven't already, subscribe to our channel so you'll be notified every time we post. We do try to post every week on Thursdays, but we would love to have some more subscribers. And if you have a friend or fellow entrepreneur that you think would resonate with this episode, please share it to them. We want to help and reach as many people as we can. Whatever sort of wisdom we may have, whether it's one little nugget or thing that impacts your business or your personal life, we're here for it. Leave comments, let us know what you liked, let us know what you want to see, and see you next week. Glad we recorded this one.
Glad we recorded this one. Fresh combo for everybody.